Hello, my name's Andy. Welcome to episode 49 of Keeping Water. If you're watching for the first time, I'm really grateful for you visiting. Mine is a small but growing channel, and it's great that you found it. Have a look around. There's lots of other videos to watch, some weekly episodes, some short clips, and I hope you decide to come back and watch some more. In this week's episode, I'm going to talk about the fish that have left the pond, why I came to the decisions I have, and what plans I have for the future. The fish that remain are doing really well. They appear to have recovered from their recent infection and are eating voraciously. The carp, unsurprisingly, are the most greedy and are becoming increasingly confident when I'm feeding them, which is a clear change for this year. In future episodes, I'm going to be looking more closely at feeding, revisiting the video I made last year, looking at amounts, behaviour and appetite, and also looking at different food options and what the fish prefer. Right, let's get started. So, a few weeks ago I bought some crucian carp for the pond. I'd thought long and hard about whether to add new fish, and if so, which fish to add. The overriding thoughts, however, were centred on creating a pseudo-natural British pond with a range of species, and the appearance of an ecosystem, although of course it's really all mostly artificial in a pond like mine. I thought the crucians would be the final piece in the jigsaw, with maybe some eventually successful deeper water plants too. But just as my first go at adding some natural looking plants didn't work, adding crucians wasn't a super success either. Firstly, due to their introduction being the likely route by which parasites entered the pond, but I'll talk more about that in another episode. And secondly, but more significantly, not all the other fish welcomed their new arrivals. The carp tend to push, bully and rush their way to whatever they're after in the pond, whether that's the cosiest part in winter, the safest part if spooked, or, more usually, to food. There's rarely if ever malice in this, it's more oblivious tunnel vision. The rudd don't really care, they're fast and agile enough to do what they want to, and also don't always want the same things anyway. The largest tench is big and confident enough to not really care, and the smaller tench are robust, while also being savvy enough to keep out of the way. The crucians, however, were neither fast, large or confident enough to handle living in what is comparatively close quarters with the much bigger carp. Actually, 3 of the 4 were not. One appeared to not really care that much, but 3 spent increasing amounts of time down by the pipework, not swimming freely, and, although they did come out to feed occasionally, far less than the other fish. In fact, I can't remember the last time I saw all 4 at once, but more on that later. So, for the last few weeks, I've given a lot of consideration to what I should do with them. I'm not one for rushing into a decision, but equally I think it's important to take prompt action to avoid stress and hardship to animals you're taking care of. Additionally, I had an option of somewhere appropriate to move them to, so it did seem that things were all pointing in one direction really. So, 3 or so weeks ago, I made the decision. But it wasn't the only decision I made. A couple of years ago, I bought 2 tench for the pond. The reason for this was to have a breeding pair, as it's easy enough to ensure you have a male and female. It's not really worked out, however. My guess would be that environmental factors, the absence of sustained warm water temperatures and enough submerged plants to spawn in are probably the causes. Maybe other things too, all just guesswork really. They appear content enough, and aside from a small amount of easily treated fin rot, they've been healthy and put on size and weights pretty quickly. But when considering how I want the pond to develop, what works best within it, what I have space for and what I don't, I've come to some conclusions. And the first one is that the smaller tench work least well in the pond. They're not as confident as the larger tench, or particularly visible. Judy, the largest tench, feeds frequently off the surface, has a presence in the pond, and well, is also the oldest inhabitant in it. Additionally, I have an idea for stocking in the pond, once I decided that the crucians were leaving, that would make the most of the fish that work best in the pond, the carp and rudd. The carp obviously have a presence, are reasonably active throughout the year, and feed and swim both at the surface and the bottom. The rudd are really active all year, are confident, colourful, are favourites to spawn at some point, and best of all are very different but complementary to the carp. So my choice would be to have more carp and, water quality allowing, let the rudd grow in numbers if and when they spawn. To a limit, obviously. But moving to that kind of stocking meant having less other fish. Obviously I kind of allowed for the 4 crucians to grow to a max of about 12 inches, 30 centimetres over time, so with them moving to a safer, better place, I could replace them with some carp. But to allow for maybe more carp and a developing family of rudd, it also made sense to move the tench on as well, especially as I had a good destination for them. At this point, I think I'd better address the remaining tench. Judy will be absolutely fine as the only tench in the pond. She rarely, if ever, follows the others. They follow her, but never the other way around. She tends to do her own thing, but when she does want to shoal up, she goes to the carp, not the other tench. In many ways, she acts more like the carp, and I don't believe she will be bothered in any way by the other tench not being there. Obviously, I'd have space for even more fish if I moved her on as well, but that was never an option. She, like the rudd, was a survivor from the first build of the pond, and is an absolute character within the current version. She will also add some difference to the speedy rudd and the larger carp, so she definitely stays and will be absolutely fine. So, the decision was made to move on both the crucians and the 2 smaller tench, which then brought me to netting them. Netting fish from my pond is tricky. In spite of it being quite clear, cloud or tree cover or plant cover can make seeing fish difficult, especially if the ones you're after are the size and colour of the crucians and tench. As it might take a while, I therefore filled the temporary pond with pond water to put each of the fish in as I caught them, rather than getting them into bags for transport straight away. And it went pretty well to begin with. I caught 2 of the crucians and both tench really quickly. After another 15 minutes I got the 3rd crucian, and then it went less well. I got 2 people out to help look. I gently moved the net all around possible hiding spots to encourage it out. I netted around the plant cover and spawning brushes, but after another hour there was no sign of the 4th crucian. Then I got in the pond and looked closely between the folds of the liner, behind the pipework and behind the pump. all the time with others looking from the side, but still there was no sign of it. And then I got to thinking about something I mentioned earlier. I can't remember the last time I saw all four together at once. So, could the crucian have died, due to being bumped and bullied by the carp? The fish would definitely have eaten it if it had. I don't think a heron or my cats would have gotten it. Certainly the other fish have shown no signs that a heron has been near the pond. They always behave really nervously for a couple of weeks after one has got close. Or has the last crucian become a master of stealth? I guess only time will tell. I plan to do a lot of in-pond filming over the next couple of weeks, so we'll see if it reappears. If so, I'll attempt to net it and it can go and join the others. If I don't see it, it will remain something of a mystery. So, after all of that, the other fish were bagged up and then put in some boxes to help the bags keep their shape during the car journey. By all accounts, they're doing fine in their new home. And I'm left with 2 carp, 13 rudd and 1 tench. My plan is to add carp once my preferred fishery delivers in late October, early November, which gives the pond a slightly lower stocking over the summer, which is no bad thing. But into 2022, I'm looking forward to a larger group of carp, which may mean spawning, and even larger and maybe more rudd. And Judy, continuing to do exactly what she wants, oblivious to whoever she has to share the pond with. Many thanks for watching this episode of Keeping Water. I really do appreciate it. Please feel free to leave any thoughts, comments, ideas and observations you have in the comment section below, especially anything related to food and feeding, and I'll try to include it in the future episodes I mentioned at the start. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.